Well, guess what? Reports been out for, I guess, a few weeks now, but it's been found that most of the deaths that are occurring now, or to put it bluntly, 76% more deaths are occurring in Republicans than Democrats because Republicans continue to buy the Kool-Aid about the vaccine from the GOP leadership, from the pundits and the fall news that they listen to. And it's actually starting to cost them lives. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Hospitals were overrun and more than 300,000 people had already died from the virus. COVID cases and hospitalizations and deaths were just surging at that point. And then, starting around mid-January, 1 month into the vaccination campaign, COVID cases and hospitalizations began to plummet. That was followed by a decline in daily deaths. You can see a steep drop-off beginning at the end of January here. And you know what was increasing at the time? Daily vaccinations. Shots in arms steadily rose through the winter and the spring of 2021. And that's because the vaccines worked. And importantly, they worked as the scientists who developed them predicted, and as the government doctors and the public health officials who painstakingly vetted them also predicted when they voted over and over again to approve them in the first place. Over the course of 2021 and 2022, dozens of doctors who sit on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee and the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, they met dozens of times to analyze data from Pfizer, Moderna, and other countries using those vaccines to assess the safety and the efficacy of the mRNA shots for Americans. Every single time, both panels voted, often unanimously, to recommend the vaccines for public use. They decided the benefits outweighed the risks. It was effectively a resounding yes for their safety and efficacy. 2 years later, the CDC says more than 1,080,000 people have died from the COVID virus. But today, we learned from a new study that more than 3 million deaths were avoided because of vaccines. 3 million people in the United States are alive today because of vaccines. We also now know that many more of those lives saved were likely Democrats rather than Republicans. In September, the National Bureau of Economic Research published research looking at hundreds of thousands of deaths in Ohio and Florida from 2018 to 2021. The researchers used voting records to determine their party affiliations, and they used previous death records from those states to determine the expected number of deaths in those states every month. They found that the excess death rates, those deaths above the expected rates, for Republicans in Florida and in Ohio during the pandemic, that rate was 76% higher than Democrats in the same states. 76% higher. And looking at their graph, you can see the gap between Republican excess deaths and Democratic excess deaths. You can see that gap widen in May of 2021, by which time vaccines were readily available. That gap has stayed present through to 2022, meaning that Republicans in those states are not vaccinating, and that at least some of those Republicans are dying instead. There is a steep cost to playing politics with public health, the highest cost you can pay by most metrics, which is why it is particularly surprising that in Florida today, Governor Ron DeSantis and his Surgeon General, Joseph Ladapo, they held a 90-minute roundtable discussion on the alleged harms of taking the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's not all. At the end of that meeting, Governor DeSantis added this.
So today, I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. And that will come with legal processes that will be able to get more information and to bring legal accountability for those who committed misconduct.
DeSantis didn't stop there. He also promised to create a public health integrity committee to, quote, offer critical assessment of recommendations from the CDC and the FDA.
In 2020, obviously, there was an increase in excess mortality because COVID was there. Then you have the mass introduction of mRNA vaccines in 2021, and you would think that there would be a reduction in excess mortality, and there just wasn't.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is correct that there are persistent excess deaths from COVID, and they tend to be among Republicans in his state and in Republican counties nationally. Despite widely available mRNA vaccines and variant-specific boosters, people are still dying of COVID. People who have not gotten the vaccines because they are Republican and have ingested a steady diet of partisan propaganda alleging that vaccines are somehow bad or can kill you or track you or turn you into an alien. So yes, unnecessary COVID deaths are still happening, and it is because of partisanship, not bad science. Which is why the governor's decision today to inject more partisanship and widely debunked anti-vax theories into the public square, it's why it's all very deeply troubling.
Now ask yourself your question. This is a party, the Republican Party that says they are the party of life. They're the party that believe in family values. They're the party that will do whatever it takes to save life. But of course, we know their stance on the death penalty. I mean, somebody does something they should be put to death. But they're pro-life. Now we have a vaccine that solves problem. And guess what? It turns out they are not worried about life after all. So if you're a Republican right now, if you're a conservative, and you're following all the conspiracy theories, etc., remember the reality that the policies that's been placed on you kills. Yes, the trying to get you not to take vaccines kills. Not giving you family leave kills. How does that kill? Because it destroys the fabric of a cohesive family, and altogether we start to get things like latchkey kids, and we know what that leads to. So all these policies that progressives support, that we know saves families, Republicans are not for it. Republican politicians, that is, they're not for it. In effect, they're only for life of a fetus, but for the living human beings, they really don't give a damn. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.